Hi guys, Chris of the Polish Geek and welcome to the review of second season of Squid Game. The season has been out for like 2-3 weeks at this point, 3 weeks I believe, but I've been away and I didn't really have an opportunity to see it, but I finally binged it and I have to say I overall had a really good time and was really entertained by it, and I think it's a very worthy follow-up of Season 1, because I've seen plenty of people saying that this is a huge step down from Season 1 and all that, but I think a lot of the criticism does stem from the fact that the show objectively isn't quite the same thing as Season 1 was, and it was kind of predictable because the first season was very innovative. It was something so unique. It was basically this science fiction survival thriller where a bunch of people basically got recruited to play child's games, and if they lost, they were killed, although they didn't know that. They were like taken to a mysterious island where they were placed in like a building, and then they were required to play children's games or else they would get killed, and whoever won the game would come out with all their money won. And we all love the show because, but before we get further, I will say how I encountered the show. It's like I didn't have a channel back then yet, actually. I was like already planning to create my own YouTube channel. I didn't have it yet then, but I was seeing people talking about this thing, Squid Game and all that, and ultimately after hearing so much about it, I ultimately decided to check out what the fuss was all about, and like everyone else, I thought the show was really twisted, but also really good and entertaining, and with so many interesting characters and all that, and yep, as soon as I started watching it, I got so engaged. I cared about all the characters as well as was really saddened by their deaths and all that. But yep, like everyone else, I was really impressed by Squid Game, and especially, as I said, it was so unique and unlike anything that Hollywood puts out nowadays. And of course, it kind of ended on a cliffhanger. It ended in a way that the ending was objectively satisfying, but it did end on a cliffhanger. That cliffhanger was that the main character, Gi-han, decided to just like completely put an end to those games once and for all and completely destroy them all. And plenty of people, including my sister, and you can see plenty of people online saying that this show really didn't need Season 2 because taking out this whole operation isn't quite the same and interesting as the games themselves. And so, if that's the way you think, then I don't think there is really a way for you to enjoy Season 2, because that's pretty much what Season 2 is, and that's pretty much what was very much expected of Season 2, because yes, it's certainly not the same thing as Season 1, Season 1 was basically about what the next game is gonna be and who's gonna die, are our favorite characters gonna survive. That's what pretty much the first season was. Season 2 obviously wasn't gonna be quite the same thing, as I said. Season 2 is very much now about Gi-han taking down the whole operation. So, understandably, it starts much slower and the actual games don't begin until like the third episode. But I think it makes perfect sense. It very much makes sense to start it slow, because Season 2 begins with Gi-han and Jun-ho. Jun-ho was this cop, was the brother of the frontman of the games, and we all predicted that he was gonna survive, and to no one's surprise, he really did survive, and like, he along with Gi-han are really the only characters are back. Plus Gi-han's close friend, who in the first season only showed up in like the very first opening shot with Gi-han, but now he's gotten promoted to one of the major characters, which I think was a really smart move, but of the main characters really then it's like we all predicted, only Gi-han, Jun-ho and the frontman of course are back. And so yes, Gi-han and Jun-ho 3 years later are basically teaming up to take down the whole operation. But then, because of course, to no one's surprise, those guys in charge of those games are way smarter than anyone could think, and obviously they aren't gonna be just like unprepared, so as a result, Gi-han gets kidnapped and taken and made to participate in the games all over again. But now he has knowledge, and he basically tells everyone that he knows what those games are gonna be, and no one understandably believes him at first, and later actually, once they do all see what is going on, the show splits characters into two camps. One that want to continue the games, but the other that actually just want to go from there alive, which is basically all the people who Gihan supports, understandably. And this is actually quite interesting because the huge changes made that in some ways you could say that the characters who want to continue playing are actually even more unsympathetic than they were in the first season, because in the first season it was basically if you left the games, all the money you wouldn't get. You wouldn't get a single penny of the money that was offered to you. But in this game, the rules are suddenly changed, and it's like after each game, like the money would be split between the survivors. And yeah, sure, they would get less money, but they would still get some money actually. But there is this whole camp that wants to insistly playing the games, and they are so greedy and all that. And yep. That's right, in some ways you could say. I mean, previous show already did that admittedly, but this one very much further continues the themes of the show of human greed and all that, and to what lengths are people willing to go if they just wanna get out of the desperate situation and to make some money. And one of the things I was worried about, and at first I speculated that unfortunately the show would fall into the trap, but I was pleasantly surprised, thankfully. But I was afraid like it was gonna to be just like basically Gihan just like talking to everyone, but then entirely new characters will be blended, all that, because in the previous season, like, you very much cared about the characters. There was like this Ali, there was this girl from North Korea and all that, and there was of course Gihan's friend Sangu, who actually was growing more and more unsympathetic, but that's neither here nor there anymore. But yes, there was this group of characters that you just grew to love, care about and all that, and their deaths were so devastating. And I was worried that most of the characters in the games here are just gonna be bland with just like Gihan really, but thankfully, and I was pleasantly surprised, this was not the case. Like, this show very much did introduce plenty of new characters I ended up very much loving and caring about what happens to them. Like, there's this pregnant girl, for example, but then there is also this mother and son also, who both just ended up in the game accidentally not expecting each other, and they're just like sticking by each other. And then there is of course this aforementioned close friend of Gihan, who in the previous season only showed up in like the very opening shot, but now got promoted to one of the main characters. And yes, I was really and very pleasantly surprised that the show still very much managed to make me really care for the new characters and what happens to them. And another thing I want to talk about is that the games here, yes, they do certainly still happen, and I'm glad that besides red light, green light, most of the games are pretty new. But before we continue, I'll have to mention this thing about red light, green light. Here in Poland, we've also been playing this game as children, although it's called in Polish like raz, dwa, trzy, Baba Yaga patrzy, which literally translates to 1, 2, 3, Baba Yaga, or the witch, looks. But other than red light, green light, most of the games are entirely new, which I'm really happy about. Although, and then again, they are not really the major focus here, because the actual focus is actually trying to really take down the games. Although this is actually a criticism that I've seen also, people that once Gihan ends up in the games, he basically gets like relegated to really be an observer, while the focus is on all the other characters. And this is true. This is true, but I didn't mind it one bit. I think in some ways it actually makes perfect sense for him to become like an observer mostly, because we already know Gihan, like we already grew to like his character, and at this point he hasn't brought his plan into fruition yet, so it kind of makes perfect sense that for some of the games he would be more like an observer really, than a main character that the story focuses on. So yes, until his plan, actually, which starts to happen at the last episode, comes to fruition, it's not like he has much to do besides being an observer. I actually think it worked perfectly, and especially it also very much gave room to focus on the new characters that I already talked about and make us care far more about them. What Season 2 also has, that Season 1 had, although not to such a big extent, is that characters being betrayed by their friends and backstab, constantly heartbreaks and all that. I mean, it still has a lot of it, but not quite the same level as the first season. But I think it makes perfect sense, because like a lot of the games were very much here about teamwork, which, and sure, the original games were also kind of about that in the first season, but later, the infamous marble game, of course, where you team up with your partner only to find out that they're playing against each other, and that's where lots of the heartbreaks began happening. Like, this show doesn't quite have something like that. Instead, like, they're constantly divided into two camps, like the Gihan's team, who all want to leave the games alive and feel like they already made so much money anyway, but then the greedy assholes who just want to continue the games despite already making so much money, just to come out with all the money. So, but I think that the fact that it didn't quite have those betrayals and friends turning on each other and that, I think it's understandable, because as I said, this is no longer about the games, they're no longer the main focus. I mean, they're still very interesting, don't get the wrong idea, but now the main focus is on Gihan trying to take down the whole operation. And I will say this, yes, it did very much end it on a huge cliffhanger in a typical Netflix fashion, because Netflix does frequently do that, where in fact I'm gonna argue that this seems like, I heard actually that this was the case, that apparently this was like all filmed as one season, but they decided to just split it in half, which is a very typical in Netflix fashion, and apparently the leaks say that season 3 is gonna come out in June, which isn't really a long wait, and I can wait that much, especially that there are some other interesting things to keep me occupied in the meantime anyway. But yes, it ended up on a gigantic cliffhanger, not like the first one, which ended up on satisfying note with opening door for potential. No, this very much ended up on to be continued. And yes, I am still very much interested to see where this is going. I can't wait for season 3. So ultimately, I personally will say, I think season 2 of Squid Game was great, and it was pretty much what I wanted from it. Like, if you're one of those people that believes that taking down the whole thing is not as interesting as the games themselves, well, then you probably aren't gonna like season 2, and that's okay. But I've seen what I've seen, and personally, I still very much was enjoying the story, and I was really got invested in all those new characters and all that, and I'm really curious now where this is all going, and I'm very glad that it wasn't really a rehash of the first season, but quite the opposite. It certainly did use some elements that made season 1 great, but instead of actually just trying to rehash it, they decided to expand and proceed with the story which the end of season 1 very much set up. And that's why I personally had a great time with season 2 of Squid Game. Maybe it's not quite as good as innovative as season 1, but then again, it's hard to do it the second time. But overall, as I said, I really enjoyed season 2 of Squid Game, and I really can't wait for season 3, which, if the leaks are true, it's not really that long wait anyway. So, thank you everyone for checking out this review. Press the like button, please subscribe to this channel, and I will talk to you soon in another video. Talk to you soon, bye!